And welcome to the December 9th, 2024 Newmarket Budget Committee meeting. It's now 6:31, and let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ned, can you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Myself, Chris Wolf, Chris Blackstone.
Here.
Ned Carpenter.
Here.
Hey. Tim Choi. Scott Foster.
Here.
All right. Justin Lusser.
Here.
Brian Hickey.
Here.
Diane Honan. Brian Rowley.
Here.
Dan Smith is excused. Brian Ward.
Here.
And Gary Swanson is filling Dan's
Here.
space. Thank you, and he's here. Thank you very much. Right, so let's begin by opening public session. It's now 6:32. Is anybody like to have anything to say? Seeing none, we'll close public session. Okay, so we'll begin tonight. We're going to be addressing both the town proposed budget and the school proposed budget for fiscal year 26. We'll begin with the town, and then we'll move on to the school. Just to remind everybody, obviously we can ask questions tonight, but next week is the Q&A period. So obviously we're interested in everything you have to say, Steve and Todd. And Steve, you have the floor.
Thank you, and this may be a good chance to also say that if you have questions that you may want a little more research done, if you want to email them ahead of time, and we can do that research and have them ready to present next Monday, that'd be great as well, just so you don't have to waste anybody's time to get everything pulled together.
Yeah.
So, great, so I'm here to present the town council's approved fiscal year 26 budget. First, I'd like to start with an economic overview, just to show where we are. We'll look at a couple key indicators such as unemployment rates and the consumer price index to just get an understanding of the economy. Currently, unemployment, this is a comparison for the last 3 years. We are seeing an uptick in unemployment in the area as of July 24. As you can see, in 2022, unemployment was 3.8 nationally as well as in 2023. That jumped up to 4.5%. The state is at 1.9, both again, 22 and 23. That jumped up to 2.9%. The county, which is 1.9 and 2.0 for 22-23, that jumped up to 2.9. Portsmouth Metro, which we're part of, is 1.6% for 22, and 23 was 1.7. That jumped up to 2.5%. And Newmarket was at 1.5 for the last 2 years, and that jumped up to 2.3. While I say that, that's negligible. Unemployment rates below 7%, that could be just a fluctuation of seasons, or it's not, that's considered negligible if not zero. So the economy there is still pretty good and strong. The next is the Consumer Price Index. This measures the average changes in prices over time what the consumers pay for different goods and services, oil, food. This just gives us an understanding of inflation and cost of living. We went back from 21 to compare the numbers. So in 2000, July 2000, I always use July for our fiscal year, if we're one to ask. The United States Consumer Price Index increased 5.4%. Then you saw that inflation hit in 22 of 8.5%. Inflation slowed down to 3.2% increase and 2.9 this past July for inflation increases. And that was across the board. Northeast Regional, we do most of our consumer price index review by Boston because we're part of that metro area. Again, 4.3% in 2021, just getting out of the pandemic. 7 that year when the pandemic was completely, well, mostly over, I won't say completely. And then 2.8 for the last year and 3.2 inflation this year. So we're not seeing the high inflation rates hitting us as we did a few years ago. The next I always do is I'd like to go over the tax rates and valuation of the town. And first is, this is just a comparison of where your taxes go. As you can see, the largest portion of your tax bill goes to the school. Local school is at 71%, or $12.24 per thousand. And the state school, which isn't money we send into the state and then get back, it's money we have to raise. And it just goes directly to the school. That's 7%, or $1.10. The county, which is the smallest portion, is 3%, or 57 cents per thousand. What we're discussing in this budget is the town portion, which is 19% of your tax rate, or $3.29. Do want to show a 5-year comparison. Again, we're that dark gray, right with the second one in. As you can see, the rate went from $29.49 last year down to $17.20. That was due to the revaluation that we did this year. But in all intents and purposes, if you look across the board there, it's pretty even for the town tax rate. It's remained pretty stable for the last few years. And here's the big reason why that tax rate dropped. In 2020, the valuation of the town was $981,517,373. Last year, when we did the revaluation, we were $1,723,789,642. That was the increase in valuation of the town. Where you determine valuation is what the market is. It's the market value. So here's a comparison from 2001. In 10 years, the town property value increased 142%. So from in 2014, it was 711 million, up to 1.72 billion. Yeah.
Is that 977 the last reval?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, in 2014-13, as you see, the line went down. When I first got to Newmarket, that's when the bubble burst. And we actually had a reduction in the assessed valuation at that point in time. But now, you just look at the figures there, the jump even between those 2 years is just huge. But one of the things we always ask is, okay, what would you sell your home for today? Is it what you paid for it 5-10 years ago? Odds are no. So that's what we have to do is fair market value. That's how we assess it. The number one place that got hit the hardest was manufactured housing. The reasoning is that's the beginning of your market now. So more people are trying to get into the market, so that's where they'll start and buy the homes. Condos as well. Single families were pretty level, they were pretty average, but that's where we saw the biggest increases.
Steve, can I ask, so proportionally, all the drops are pretty much the same with the exception of the town, which seems like almost a 50% drop from 2023 to 2024.
I'm sorry, which slide are we on?
So, I'm sorry, did you press, oh, sorry, you went back to the 5-year tax rate comparison.
Yep.
So if you look at the proportional drop from total school
Yep.
and local, they're all about the same, but the drop for town proportionally is much more significant, it seems like.
We received additional revenues from the state, highway aid, as well as room and meals tax.
Gotcha.
We're not betting on that again. We've heard the current governor and the new governor are asking departments to cut, I think, 4% of all their budgets, which usually comes to, okay, we're not sharing revenues as much as we used to with the local level. And this is just the, oops, sorry.
Can I ask a question on the CPI as well? The numbers that you showed there, are those annualized numbers?
Yes.
Or are they end of
Annualized
fiscal
in
year?
July, at the beginning, we do the fiscal year, so it's,
July 1,
Exactly.
June 30?
yep.
Okay.
And this is just a tax ratio, because some people ask, well, why did you have to do a revaluation? We need to be between 90 and 110% of our valuation. Last year, we were at 59%. So what we were showing is that all our valuations were only 59%. And you had to bump it up, so now we're at 99%. Again, if you look into 2012, you can see that where we had the drop, it went from 107 to 102. And this is just when the market started picking up again. And again, I haven't seen it in my career to have this much of an increase in such short periods of time. And I've been doing this since 2001. So. get through many of these.
Sorry, do you have a sense of what that increase has been kind of regionally, or are we
Same.
in line? Same, okay.
Okay,
So
there's
it's all-
nothing,
yeah.
you can see the newspapers, people are, and it's even the same kind of stock that's being hit. I know Exeter's having a large issue with their manufactured housing, and just talked to the Portsmouth city manager, and she's going through the same thing, so it doesn't matter where we are. Now the budget and recommendations. So, the town council has approved and proposing a budget of $18,634,219, which is a 5.35% increase over the previous year. Total increase is $946,388. Of that, the general fund is an increase of $748,852. The special revenue funds, which are the library, solid waste, as well as the recreation revolving fund, is a $92,706 increase. And the enterprise funds, which are water and sewer, which are not funded through taxation, they're funded through the ratepayers, is $104,830. And again, just to show the breakdown, so the general fund, which is what everybody thinks of as the town budget, is the largest portion at 61%, or $11,438,282. The special revenue funds, as I said, which is solid waste, because there is a percentage that gets paid through the pay-as-you-throw system, is the recreation revolving, which is paid through the fees that they collect for their programming. And we put the library in there because we don't have bottom line authority. Well, we have bottom line authority of the library. We don't have authority over each line item because the way state law is, so we put them in there as well. So that's $2.1 million, or 12% of the budget. And finally, water and sewer, the enterprise fund, is a little over $5 million at 27% of the operating budget. So where's it going? So human resources, we're seeing an 8% increase, which is $182,923. It's payroll, fringe benefit costs, as well as healthcare. So really fixed costs there. The police department, we have a 5.2% increase, mainly $115,984. That's for the contractual pay increase for those covered by collective bargaining unit. Welfare, we're seeing an increase there of $5,000. That's for rental assistance. We are seeing more requests for assistance there, which, when I first got here, that budget was over $100,000, and it's way much lower now. We are seeing a reduction there, but we're starting to see that tick up. Assessing, we see an $11,000 increase. That's for assessing software. So anybody who knows software now, we don't buy software. You subscribe to software. So that's our increase in subscription there, is $11,000. Legal, we're seeing an increase of 15%. That's due to just contractual. We're not seeing more cases. We actually have our legal counsel on retainer for a flat fee. It's just we haven't adjusted their rates in probably 4 years. So
What's the dollar amount of that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have my budget in front of me, but I'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah. Street lighting, we're seeing an increase of 12.7% due to increase in electricity costs. We don't get our electricity through like the community power in New Hampshire. We have to go through Eversource. And the other thing is, when it comes to street lighting, it's not an hourly, like if you turn off a light, you don't get charged. We get charged if it's on or off. So this is also my plug. If you see a street light out, please let us know, because we're getting charged if it's on or off. And finally, the contribution to the sidewalk repair capital reserve has an increase of $80,000, trying to address some much needed sidewalk improvements throughout town to make it more walkable.
Improvements everywhere, or just?
Both, yeah.
And the PD department, how long is their contract for?
2026, but we'll get into more of that in a few seconds.
Thank you.
So one of the big things that we ask is always our contribution to capital reserves. This is sort of like our savings account. What was appropriate last year was $526,000. What I recommended was $543,000, or $17,000 increase. And the council approved a $623,000 increase. Capital reserve contribution, which was a $97,000 increase. And as I said, a big chunk of that went to the sidewalks. The other increases are our 300th anniversary is coming up. So we're increasing contribution to that. It's $5,000 a year. so they can have some seed money to do the celebration in 2027. And finally, stormwater management, we're decided to do more projects when it comes to Moonlight Brook and other areas, so we increased that by $25,000. This is our revenue budget, so which a lot of people don't take consideration when they're doing the budget, when they're reviewing it. And we're anticipating having an increase of our revenue budget of $10,957,293, which is roughly a $600,000 increase. Most of that is through additional fees that we've been collecting for building permits, motor vehicle registrations. We see a slight increase, but nothing huge, as well as additional money that we're withdrawing from our fund balance, which is our rainy day fund. We're healthy enough, so that's where basically we're offsetting what we're putting into sidewalks from that fund. And this is the next slide. It's an estimate, only using data as we have today. And that's the estimated tax impact. If the way you figure out the tax rate is to take the gross appropriations was $18,634,219. You subtract the $10,957,293, add overlay, which is abatements and other payouts that we may have to do through the year. We had bumped that up because of the revaluation process, and we may see additional abatements, so that's $150,000. And we add the war service credits. Those are the credits that we give to veterans in our community. The net town appropriation is $7,971,926. And you divide that by the valuation of the town, which is $1,713,850,837, and you come to a tax rate of $4.65. Finally, potential warrant articles that we have. So all of our warrant articles, because we're a charter community, are only financial articles. There is a question going to be on the ballot this year, which is to form a charter commission. So every so often we put a question forward, and that's basically reviewing the town's constitution and seeing if we're staying up to date in practices to where we should be for a community our size. But the potential financial warrant articles that we have is first is issuance of $100,000 bonds for planning and design of the Bay Road Force Main replacement. This loan will be taken out from the state revolving loan fund. It'll have $100,000 forgiveness, so no impact on the ratepayers. For those who don't know, we have a force main that goes under the Lamprey River, and it broke. Last year we were able to fix it, but we want to get it out of there for the future, so we're trying to do that. The next would be the issuance of $5.5 million bonds or notes for the replacement of Bay Road Force Main and Pump Station. There's potential of $2.5 million in congressionally directed spending, or what commonly referred to as earmarks. We're working with our congressional delegation to get that. And the remaining amount will be raised through the ratepayers, not taxpayers. There's a $1.4 million Cushing Road and Lumberland Drive stormwater improvement. That's because we want to make sure that the water that's going back into the bay in that area is clean. It's not treated, but at least get some of the chemicals and sediments taken out of it to reduce the nitrogen levels in the bay. It would, the $1.4 million would have a $360,000 principal forgiveness, and it would be 7 cents on the tax rate in year one if we were to issue that. And this goes to School Board Chair's question about the police union contract. We were discussing recently, and we have come to an agreement on a potential an amendment to this current contract. We currently have 5 vacancies in the police department, 13 officers. And it's not a cultural thing, it's money. We're losing officers to other communities because their contracts were just passed, and they're packing up because they can make more money in other communities. And on the flip side, we're having a hard time getting new officers because some would take a cut in pay to come here. And we try to actually take people who have already been in the field in other communities, so it could actually cost us less in the long run because we don't have to train them. So the council authorized myself and the chief to sit down with the police union to come up with an amendment. So what it is that first thing, we're going to look at 3 things. First, the rate of pay for private details would increase to $65 an hour through June 30th, 2026. There's no impact on that. That's what we charge like phone company, electric company, to have details out there, construction companies. So it's covered by what they pay to be out there.
What's the current rate?
50, like mid-50s. So it is but even when we look at that new rate, that's not all that goes into the officer's pocket. We also have administrative fees in there because we're using a cruiser, we're using our time to determine the billing, so we have there's a formula to do that. The next, we would be replacing the term longevity with retention incentive and increased coverage for additional monies for the officers to try to keep them on longer. We did get rid of longevity in 2012 on the town side. We're looking at having it returned because we're just trying to get ways to keep employees.
So what would replacing that term do for us? Financially, nothing? Okay. Just make
Longevity is a touchy
Sure,
term.
sure.
So we're actually showing what it's for. It's to retain employees.
Yeah.
And finally, we would see a one-time hourly increase of $7 an hour for patrol officers, $5 for sergeants, and $4 for the dispatch, which would be implemented on March 15th. The police chief is able to fund the period between March and July 1st through his current operating budget because of vacancies in the positions. So, and then what we'd have to do is raise the $295,016 to make it up if this were to pass, and then the following year, which would be 17 cents on the tax rate.
How is that $7 arrived at? Is it based on communities,
It is
nearby
based on
communities?
community survey. And it's negotiations, so we came to a,
And does that get us within what percentile of neighboring communities?
I don't know the percentile, but it gets us in the market. We're probably about the middle.
When was this contract put? Isn't this 2 or 3 years?
2022 or 3, yeah. 2023, sorry.
it's
I
23,
recall we
yeah.
were in the same position at that point, too.
Yeah. And we were one of the first ones to come out with a collective bargaining agreement right after the pandemic. And then a lot of the other communities did. I think Durham's going in now, Exeter went in last year. So we're seeing that hit. But the problem is, like I said, we are down 5 officers and we're having a difficult time recruiting. And they're just, it's not because they don't want to be here, it's because they can make this significantly more money in another community.
It just strikes me as a retention amount instead of a draw amount, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to increase the,
It's
but it's
something
a
that-
start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at that when we do open up the entire contract next year. This is just, we want to do something, that's why it's an amendment, not a complete, there's no extension, it's still, 26 is the end. So even on July 1st next year, that when I went over the budget, that 5% is still going to go on July 1st. So this money is the thing that, if it passes, this is what will fund that.
What's the determination for how many police officers are needed in any town or city? Is it the same?
It's not, there's always standards, but it's also, if Hampton's going to have a lot more police officers because of the nature of what they have there. Newington has 400 residents, but has a full-time police and fire department because of the nature of what they have. For our size community, we're in comparison to other communities our size in the region. And that's the other thing too, is we look at the region. Because, crime doesn't stop at the Newmarket border and say, oh, can't go there. So, and that is it.
Okay, so everyone's been asked in previous writings, and I'll just repeat it. We will have our list of questions to you Friday morning.
Sure.
Okay?
Great, thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
For the record, for the stenographer, Danielle Honan joined us at 6:35. While we're waiting for Steve to set up, about 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I sent you all, just let me know if you have this or I need you to send it again. I sent you all the proposed budget, which is a real slugger to read. But if you don't have it, I can send it to you again in E4.
I got
just so if you can reference it as part of your review for your questions. Steve, welcome. Sorry, Todd.
No, I actually enjoy being here to hear the town side as well, because as I say every year, I'm not a Newmarket resident, and it's nice to hear the whole picture that kind of inform a lot of the work that the school district does. Thank you for having me here tonight to share the proposed budget for 25-26. I do want to, on the front end, acknowledge Jana Mellon is not here tonight. The reason she's not here tonight is because the weather is terrible up in her neck of the woods, and I encourage you to go home, to not drive home in the slush and slop that's out there. But Sean Pine has kindly come tonight to be my moral support. So thank you, Sean, for being here. Very much appreciated. So it's interesting, as I think about the 25-26 budget, I feel like this is a continuation of the 24-25 budget. Right after the election in March, in fact, right after the new board was seated, we immediately began talking about what we needed to do to posture ourselves for the 25-26 budget. We knew a couple of things. We knew, number one, that with the property reeval in town, it was going to have an impact on some sectors of the community. And as Steve pointed out, we knew that the modular homes and the more modest priced homes were affected more significantly by that. We wanted to make sure we fully had our heads wrapped around that potential impact. A second thing we were very concerned about is we have a teacher contract that will be going before the voters this coming spring, in March, and we really wanted to make sure that when we wanted to make room in our budget process to be sure we could afford what we knew we were going to need to do with a teacher contract. You heard Steve certainly talking about the police. Similar issues exist in the teacher world, not quite to the same extent, but being competitive in the regional job market is really important to getting and keeping good people. So we knew we were going to have a contract that would be significant. We knew that, and we wanted to make sure that we could absorb that impact, but keep the impact as close to level on the community as we possibly could. So as we started down the process, and by the way, the budget narrative that you all have, this presentation loosely follows that. If you want, I can point to the pages as I go so you can know what I'm referring to, but you can also just watch on the PowerPoint. Keep track of that if you like. This is the first page of the narrative. When we started down the road of building our budget, we started with goal development. First one, as I just said, we established an overall budget increase of no more than 2% on the operational side. And I use the term operational side. That means everything except the teacher contract. We wanted to make sure that we kept things at 2%. And as Steve pointed out, with inflation running over 3%, to have an operational budget of 2% is really, you needed to make some hard decisions, and we did do that. Second goal we had, we wanted to make sure we could continue to support ongoing program improvement efforts. Both schools in the last 2 years have developed school growth plans. They've identified areas that we need to get better at as a school district. And we wanted to make sure that funding was provided so that that work could continue. Things like adopting a new literacy program at the elementary school. Embracing a multi-tiered system of support for both academic and behavioral health for our students. Those kinds of things. We wanted to make sure the funding was there. Third goal was we wanted to make sure we could fully fund the newly adopted CIP. I believe Jana presented it to you a couple of weeks ago. Basically, that was adopted last year. We want to make sure every year we're including the funding needed so that we don't reach a point at some point down the road where we have to say, oops, we missed that, and we need to ask for large sums of money. So we're trying to maintain that. Fourth goal, again, as I've said to you before, we want to maintain competitive salaries across our organization. 2 years ago, I came to you and explained to you about the new Terra contract, and so we did make some significant adjustments there. We also made some adjustments in our non-CBA people. We want to make sure we don't lose the ground game. We're not trying to become the highest paid, but we're trying to keep ourselves, we've used the goal of top 25%. That's what we aspire to do, and we want to make sure we keep that there. For everybody other than the teacher contract, and it's, we factored in a 3% cost of revenue. We wanted to continue to implement programs to support social and emotional health. I'm pleased to report that about a month ago, we were notified that our school district was selected to receive a grant of $750,000 to be paid to us $150,000 a year for 5 years to help us develop some social emotional learning programs and to really expand that behavioral health support. So please know that there's money in the budget, but we're also looking for as many creative ways to maintain that. Very excited at that work. And I do want to commend Erica McNeil for all her work on that. And then the last goal was just be responsible with Newmarket's money. I mean, we always want to remind ourselves that while we have to run schools, we also have to balance that with the needs of the taxpayers. So I'd like to jump to the end. So this slide here, it's page 11 in your narrative, is really the summary of the entire budget, everything except the cost of the new teacher's contract. So basically what we're looking at is a total increase of 1.97%. Right next to the circled 197, you can see the number $539,312. That's the new dollars that have been added to this budget to fund all of the programs I'm going to talk to you about over the course of the next little while. But that's basically what we achieved. How did we do it? Basically, there are 4 things that we really embraced in this process. The first thing is, this is not a slide. It's a slide, but it's not in your book. I just want to mention that. It's in the PowerPoint. Great. Okay. We've done a lot of work around renegotiating service contracts. Saving about $80,000 on a new custodial contract. We have, through the really hard work of Dave Riley and Jenna Mellon, we have renegotiated a number of our other contracts, for example, waste removal and recycling, that contract. We've been able to continue it for 2 more years at the same rate that we were paying. And we also have really done a lot of work to try to keep our energy costs as close to flat as possible. So there's a lot of work done there. Lower left-hand corner, we're going to be making a health care plan change. One of the things we did this year, we formed a committee back in January that was represented by all of the employee groups in the district, the administration, everybody who would be impacted by a health care plan. We reviewed 9 health care plans and came back with a recommendation to move towards a company called New Hampshire Interlocal Trust, which is a Harvard Pilgrim health care plan. I say that to you not because I can tell you here are the number of dollars we saved, but if you know anything about the healthcare industry, you're really looking to prevent the significant negative in the future. You're trying to contain costs. If we'd have stayed with the healthcare plan that we currently have, which is school care, we were facing an 18% increase in our insurance rates. Okay? By changing to New Hampshire Interlocal Trust, we are facing a 6.5% increase. And that, by the way, is with the fact that New Hampshire Interlocal Trust is already about $120,000 cheaper than our current plan. So it was a big savings. In terms of money going forward, it's still more money than we're paying this year for health care, but it's a heck of a lot less more than it could have been had we not done that work and made that change. And what I particularly like about this particular plan was that we engaged all of the stakeholders in the district who are going to be impacted by the change, and we looked at it, and people feel very strongly that not only are they getting a more cost-effective plan, they're getting a better plan, a plan that actually meets their needs better. So I feel very good about that. Other things we've done, I'll give you a little bit of a staffing analysis, but we have made some staffing reductions, 2.58 FTE across the system. You've heard me say this many times, and I'll say it again. Whenever we have an opening in this district, the first thing we ask is the position necessary as it is currently constituted? If the answer is no, we then ask, is there another priority area that we have established that this position can help solve? If the answer is no to that, we don't fill it. In the last 3 years, we have reduced by 9% staffing, and I would challenge anyone to point to a place where you've seen a reduction in services to kids or quality of experience. We're just carefully looking at everything and repurposing it. So that has been a big thing, and I'll talk about that more. And then the last corner there is leveraging trust funds and food service balances. One of the things that we face in the school district, there are really 3 areas that we can get substantial unexpected cost increases that we have difficulty budgeting for. One is healthcare, and obviously I've just talked to you about the change in healthcare plans, but even with that, at any given year, we could have a person who is single gets married and now they have a family plan, and there's a significant increased cost. It's very challenging to target that. So we have a trust fund for healthcare benefits specifically for the purpose of helping us absorb costs, so we can budget closer to the numbers, but there's if you will, a safety valve in the event that we have cost overruns. So healthcare is one. A second one is capital improvements, and certainly the capital improvement plan. If we wait until a big ticket item comes up and then we come to you and say, hey, we need $1 million to do X, Y, or Z, it has an impact right there and then. What we're trying to do with our capital improvement plan is map it out over a 20-year period and make sure our trust funds contain the resources needed to do those projects. Over this next year, there's going to be a new roofing project at the junior senior high, and there's also going to be the completion of the windows project at the elementary school, and we'll be using trust funds to pay for that. The last area that is significant, and this is one that actually is the story of this budget to some extent, is the potential for unexpected special education out-of-district placement costs. We have a trust fund, it's a special education trust fund that we have put money aside for. We have consciously made the decision to budget closer to the exact number we need, knowing we have this trust fund available to us. Currently, I'll show you a slide later on, but about $350,000 is in that trust fund. That sounds like a lot of money, but I will tell you, one out-of-district placement can cost upwards of $300,000. So we could have a student move into the district tomorrow that we don't even know exists, and we're responsible for educating the child, and it can get quite pricey. So that's a third area of budgeting that we had to take some careful looks at, and I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. And then the last thing in that fourth corner is we are fortunate enough that we have a food service fund balance left over from the pandemic. You may recall we were being reimbursed at a much higher rate during the pandemic, so we have over $100,000 in a food service fund balance. And we're using that to basically make up any cost overruns and also to do some upgrades in our food service program. Please note that the food service program in general is a self-funded program. It's paid for largely by what people pay for meals, but usually at the end of the year there can be cost overruns that you have to cover, and that can be covered through that trust fund, or that fund balance, excuse me. So moving right along, obviously students is what we're in the business for, so we always start as we are planning our staffing model by looking at numbers. As you look at these numbers, really over the last 5 years, we've kind of stabilized in the high 900s. That's kind of where we are. With 22, we're 1,002, and next year we're projecting 994. The place that is the most crazy-making is to predict how many kindergartners are going to show up in our doors. And if you look in the last 5 years, we actually go back to 2020, we had 86 kindergartners in 2020, 63 in 21. 84 in 22, 67 in 23, 85 in 24, down to 65 this year. We're splitting the difference and projecting 75 for next year, but that's one of those things that's very challenging to plan staffing for. But overall, we have a fairly stable enrollment pattern. And so as we looked at these numbers at both the elementary school and the junior senior high, we made some staffing decisions that we felt were supported by the fact that we could see the numbers adjusting. One of the things that we talk about is right-sizing our staff, because it's clear over the last 5 years we're slightly down in numbers, and we just got to make sure we don't have too much staffing. We want adequate staffing, we want good staffing, but we don't want to have too many. So we analyze this and make sure the staffing meets the student need. So in terms of staffing plan, as I told you earlier, this gives you an indication of sort of where we have been and where we're going. If you look at the high water mark is 21 and 22. That's the year Jana, Mellon, and I began working together in the district. And you can see since that time, we have made some very careful staffing decisions. So we've reduced by 18.88 FTEs, or, as I said before, 9%. That's across the organization. We've been able to do things, in fact, I'll talk about it in a little more detail when I get to the facilities department, but just by training up our people so they have a wider range of skills allows us to use them differently and reduce the number of people we need. In fact, in this budget, Dave Riley in the facilities department really absorbed quite a bit because we had expanded the capacity by getting really good people in and training them up. So that's the staffing model. One of the challenges when I get into trying to explain what's new in the budget is when you get into a large number like 27 million plus, trying to tease out what exactly is different. This is a chart that's my attempt at trying to tell you what's different. You tell me if it makes sense. On the right side, you can see the black numbers. When we started our budget process, the board asked us to develop what we call the level services budget. What a level services budget was, basically to take what we're currently doing, bring it forward, and figure out what the cost would be of everything except the teacher contract. When we did that, we established that operationally we need to increase by $497,870. Benefits would need to go up $68,102. Salaries would need to go up $315,787. The red side is what we are doing. And so relative to that, so you can see in operations, we found almost $100,000 in savings. A big part of that, by the way, is the new custodial services contract, but we found other efficiencies, so we reduced there. The benefits, again, it's a relative difference, but we're shaving $42,000 off in benefits. A lot of that is in the health plan that we've established. And then obviously when you eliminate 2.58 positions, the salaries and the costs that go along with that come out. And so on the left side is what we have removed from this budget to get us to that 1.97%. This chart kind of gives you an idea of how our spending is distributed. As you can see, salaries and benefits make up 2/3 of our costs. And keep in mind that the board gave us the goal of building a 2% or less budget exclusive of the teacher contract. So really where we had to focus most of our energies on was either reducing positions or finding savings in benefits and operations, which is largely what we've done. So but it's important to keep that in mind. I always like to point out, though, that you see that debt service slice of pie, and actually it says 7%, but it's actually 7.6%. 7.6% of our budget every year is the bond on the beautiful schools that this town voted to support 6 or 7 years ago. I bring that up not because I want to dwell on it, but I just want to remind people it was a commitment this community made, and that's a starting point. So there's a $2.1 million investment every year in that bond, and that bond runs until 2046. So it's just important. The good news about a budget that goes up is that becomes a smaller percentage every year. I think last year I told you it was 8%. So it's the same number, it's just a little bit less of a percentage of the total budget. But it's important to keep that in mind, that that's part of what we're planning for. And by the way, the board made a really good decision earlier in the process. We had about $200,000 remaining in the bond fund that we had some options as to what to do, and the board chose to use that to pay down this year's bond debt. So what that will mean is we'll have $200,000 more in the fund balance at the end of the year, which should be a positive. So this slide kind of gives you an idea of the cost centers in the budget and where increases and decreases lie. Sean is here. I'll commend him for coming in with a budget that's down 0.47%. I would have commended you anyway, Sean. You can see at the junior senior high, it's a 1.53% increase. Student services is up 6.86%, and I'll talk about why that is in just a minute. Technology is up $823 or 0.08%. The facilities department is down 1.52%. And the curriculum, general administration, finance, that's what is affectionately known as the SAU, is down 1.6%. And you can see the bond fund at the bottom. You can see our interest paid on that is down a little bit by $4,000. All of that gets us to an increase of $539,312, or that 1.97%. Historically, what does that mean? Obviously, that was the last column there, 25, 26, shows you where this fits into the grand scheme of things. Again, I want to emphasize that this is exclusive of the teacher contract. I'm anticipating that assuming the teacher contract, which we are this close to finishing up on, is passed, the total increase is going to be north of 4%. So it's going to be consistent with the last 5 years in terms of total increase for the community. But know that the teacher contract is for 110 employees, which is 60% of our employees. So you have to understand that that's going to be a number that's going to make the total increase closer to 1.2, which is be about 4%. It's always important to talk about where does our revenues come from. Steve did a nice job of explaining the swept tax, and basically the state provides us assistance to schools in two forms. One is SWEP, the statewide education property tax. That's the red up there. And then the net education grant, which is the black. If you look at the 26 budget, you can see our grants and our SWEP didn't change a whole heck of a lot. But to the person who's feeling the pinch of everything keeps going up and the rate, the aid is not changing. I mean, obviously it costs more, it'll cost more in 25, 26 to do what it costs to do in 24, 25. So effectively, by having it be flat, it is a negative to us because nothing we're doing is going down. But the other thing to it's subtly, a shift has taken place here. You'll see that our net grant aid went down $11,000. And our SWEP went up $21,000. What that means to the taxpayer in Newmarket is $32,000 shifted to the town of Newmarket from the state. Now, that's not a huge sum, but it's again, they're not raising state aid commensurate with the real cost of education. And when I talk about student service, you'll feel my pain and understand my point. Continuing on, so at the elementary school, this is the slide for them. Basically what we've been able to do is determine based on enrollments that we can absorb one reduction of a professional staff member at the elementary school. We've made a number of shifts over there. One of the things I'll talk about a little bit is our grant money from the federal government is going down, particularly Title I funding. And most of our interventionists at the elementary school, or much of them, are coming out of Title I. And we have less and less Title I money. So we've had to absorb more and more of the interventionists in the local budget. So that's some of what's going on there. And obviously, materials and books and such is something that we needed to do. But again, as I pointed out, Sean's world is down 0.47%. Junior, senior high school, you can see we've got a total increase of 1.53. The big thing, we did the analysis of staffing, and we can do some reductions there. 1.2 FTEs are absorbable there. You'll notice there's a couple of things. You'll see the health dental insurance is up $60K. Again, that's because people make decisions about what they need for health care. So you may have gotten married or whatever, have a family, you change plans, it costs more, and that's just the reality of health insurance. You'll see in the tuition category, $57K up. We are seeing the tuition rate for students going to SST, which is our Career Technical Center, have been going up. 2 years ago, the tuition rate was about $4,200 a kid. This year, it's up to $5,300. There's a kind of weird relationship between the numbers in Newmarket increasing at SST, meaning our kids more wanting to go there, the overall enrollment in SST dropping, and the shifting of the per pupil cost coming back to us. So it does have an impact on us. So if more of our kids want to go than other schools, we end up, it's a higher impact on us. So anyway, just something to be aware of. So that's the junior, senior high school. I've made reference to the student services budget, and here's what I'll go into it with you. This is, when you look at 539,000 increase, the lion's share of this is in student services, and it's in two places. You see professional services is up 147K, and tuition costs for out-of-district placements is up 261. That's $408,000 up in those two areas. What that cost covers is specialized transportation and placement of students at programs that the Newmarket schools are not able to provide students. And I will tell you, one of the challenges we've faced is that there are, particularly when there are students that have social, emotional, or behavioral health struggles, there are fewer and fewer places around here that take students. And so we're finding that we are having to transport them a lot farther, and so that does add to the transportation costs. To piggyback off that, the other thing that is important to note, at the state level, there's this concept, they call it CAT aid, or catastrophic aid, and that's an aid program where we submit the cost of our special education, out-of-district placements, and services we're providing, and they're supposed to reimburse at a 98% rate. This year, they reimbursed at 68%. So that's a big shift of cost onto the local taxpayer. Yes?
Just doing some division here, and maybe I've got the quantity wrong, but in terms of the number of students, but it looks like 25, 26, you're looking at 203 students.
203 identified special education students.
That works out to be $37,900 per student. Looks like this budget's divided by 203.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, again, we have 8 students that are out of district placements. And if you look in that tuition line, $1,159,727, that's largely paying the cost of a very small subset of students. So if you remove that from that calculation and do it again, Chris, it will be a much smaller number. That's why the state has always had this concept of catastrophic aid, is that it's not, you want to make sure that you provide the services kids need, but if a student moves into your district and you have not been able to plan for it, or budget for it, it can have a very dramatic impact locally, and that is what's happening. We've been fortunate enough, I mean, Erica McNeil does yeoman's work finding every possible angle and way to keep kids in district and to meet their needs. But when push comes to shove, when a kid needs to be placed, it's a costly thing. And I think that's more what is at stake there, Chris. I think if you redid the numbers, you're probably looking, I mean, the per pupil cost for our district is, let's see, it must be about $26,000 a student. That's for everybody. So if you take that subgroup, it's not that much more. The students that are receiving special education services in-house, it might be an average of maybe $10,000 per kid more, but not obviously $250,000, which is the cost that we get with many other district places.
Todd, could you guess how much time Erica and her assistant spend applying catastrophic aid? Because it's not like you just submit big invoice at the end of the year. It's like a daily.
Yeah, it's actually a very ridiculous process, to be very honest. I mean, if you could imagine your worst nightmare trying to deal with a doctor's office that won't give you the paperwork you need to submit to your insurance company, and you're dealing with 200 doctor's offices and trying to convince them that, no, you need to tell us so we can submit this for reimbursement. I mean, a very significant amount of time. I can't
it's
even...
item by item by item.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And so we spend a lot of time training our staff, because staff that work with students that are eligible for the CAT aid, they need to know how to track their hours and how to submit it and all of those things. But in the end, through all the efforts, we got reimbursed at a 68% rate for this past year. And the thing that is particularly crazy making is it's always 2 years behind. So you're getting money that you should have gotten 2 years ago, but you're dealing with now. And so it's like it's a continuous I don't know how Erica doesn't go crazy on a daily basis, to be honest, because it is very frustrating. Bottom line, though, the impact on our local budget is that we have a lot more out-of-district placement costs than we recently had to absorb. And we made a very, as I said before, we made a conscious decision in building our budget. We know we have $358,000 in the special ed trust fund. We anticipate requesting to put some more in that fund, so it'll probably be over $400,000 after this round. We see that as being the cost of a low, middle, and a high out-of-district placement. So basically, we're thinking that would be, we've got 3 out-of-district placements at about $400,000 we could cover with the trust fund. So we consciously budgeted closer to what we know we have. So the numbers there represent actual kids that are here that we are going to be paying for. And by the way, I love the fact that we do it. We're meeting kids' needs. It's not about, there's no resentment. It's more, people have to understand that it does cost money and we're not getting the aid we're supposed to get from the federal government and the state government. So next slide, as Chris already highlighted, we have one of the interesting things that has happened, particularly since the pandemic, as you can see, is there has been a spike in special education identifications. To be clear, this is not a Newmarket thing. We have checked all across the region. Every school in the state is facing the same pattern. Since the pandemic, we've had a spike up over 20% of the students are being identified for student service, special education services. Many of them are behavioral health, mental health related issues that we also then have to create programs to support kids for those kinds of things. So that the grant I was telling you about, which we're really thrilled to have, that is about building structures to support kids that have serious behavioral challenges.
So it's actually normal that, in terms of like across the state school boards, like, for example, 2021, you were looking at 17% of the student population, and then for 2025, you're estimating 21% of the student population. That's
I would
fairly
say
consistent.
for most of my career in public education, certainly the last 20 years, typically the number you talk about identifications is typically in the 15 to 17 range, and it's been very stable in that way. Across the state, and frankly across the country, you're hearing lots of people talking about the mental health challenges that students are having, and that shows up in classrooms, and you have to address that. So yeah, without getting too political, I do fear if we lose more federal and state aid, it's going to become increasingly challenging at the local level to maintain the quality of services that we need to provide kids.
Has there been a change to the definition of special ed students? Is there any fluctuation in how they fit into the category?
Well, the area that's growing the most is emotional handicap. So and basically there's emotional handicap, and then there's a specific learning disability. Typically, the vast majority of kids that you're dealing with have a specific learning disability. They have a processing issue or something that you support that way. There's been a real spike in students that have mental health and emotional health related issues, and so there's more and more people, and they're legitimate. They're just kids that have serious regulatory issues, challenges.
I think Ned's saying, did they change the way they define it? So all of a sudden we have more kids going.
No, I think what's happened is
No.
that the world has changed. And I think what's happening is particularly, we often talk in terms of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, but there is no question about it. There's a change in the nature of many students and the experiences they have outside of school coming into school. And there does appear to be an increase in kids that, I think back to when my kids were little, doing things like bringing them to library story times so they can be introduced to other kids and sort of acclimate to other kids, doing things that require sharing and those kind of things. We have an increasing number of kids that they're not getting those kinds of exposures. And frankly, there's an increase, and I'm not a doctor, but there's also an increase in kids that are on the Asperger's autism spectrum that have various disorders that are not, they're very intellectually high functioning, but they require a lot of support. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that number can be lowered as a percentage, I think, by having really good, what we call tier 1 classroom programming. But the need isn't going to go away.
I mean, it could be a bubble, right? We could see in 5 years from now if there's this post-pandemic bubble that kind of,
Right.
which goes through, but
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a question, Chris? Or you? Okay. So the next department I'll talk about is technology. I give Jason Terry a hard time, like, why couldn't he shave $823? What's wrong with him? No, he did a great job. Jason did a great job. 0.08% up. I do want to take a moment to just give a shout out. One of the things, we have a very small IT department. We have basically 5 people. And they service 200 staff and upwards of 1,000 students, and probably 12 to 1,500 devices, and keeping things running and smoothly. And by the way, under an environment where cybersecurity has become an increasingly big topic, and protecting student privacy and data and all that kind of stuff is significant. Jason and his team do a fantastic job. They've really done a great job of staying one step ahead of things. One of the things Jason has done is by networking at the state level, he's got us involved in all kinds of free cybersecurity related programs that are really helping us stay one step ahead of the game. In fact, we were the first public school system in the state to fully adopt a cyber plan that was approved by all the various entities at the state level, so it's pretty cool. The other thing I mentioned before, trust funds. One of the things that I'll show you the balances of trust funds. We also have a technology trust fund that was set up apparently a long time ago with the idea that it would be used for providing technology back before the district was one-to-one to families that did not have it. Obviously, we've gone to one-to-one, so every kid is issued a device. So we have looked for ways to utilize that funding that will help the district. For this year, we're going to be using it to replace a network firewall appliance, so we'll use part of it. So over the next 5 or 6 years, we'll spend down that trust fund because it's a way to get some of the stuff we need to get done, but not have to include it in an impact on taxes. Facilities, I've said, I've praised Dave over and over. Dave Riley and his team are amazing. The same strategy that Jason uses in the IT department to really get good people and train them up and make sure they have the skills. Dave does the same thing at the facilities level. Most of this savings comes into just the reduction in professional services, things like we don't have to hire plumbers as often to come in and fix the leaky faucets. We don't have to hire HVAC people to come in and fix things because our people have those skills and talents. And so we're really seeing a reduction in that. And so we're able to use their expertise and our resources to do things to actually improve the facilities. And every year, Dave creates a laundry list of things that his team is going to tackle internally. And it's amazing when you look at what it would cost to outsource it versus us doing it. It's amazing how much money can be saved that way. But congratulations to Dave Riley on coming in at down of 1.52. And then the central office we have reduced by 1.6. Most of that came about because we had an HR consultant who was working with us as we did a whole bunch of internal process development, and we no longer need that consultant, and we're able to manage it internally, so we're easily able to shave that off. And then, as I mentioned, we're using the food service fund balance, using 24,000 of that, so that's how we're able to accomplish the down by 1.6 at that level. Again, just a quick reminder that the other areas of the budget, debt service and then the food service, you can see those numbers. These are the balances of all of our trust funds. I just want to kind of run through them with you. As I mentioned, the insurance and benefits expendable trust fund, that really is a safety valve. This year it looks good because we're going to have a new insurance provider, but a couple of years ago we had planned for 8.5%, and all of a sudden we got a 12% increase. And that ended up being like $50,000, $60,000 we hadn't planned on. This trust fund gives us that wiggle room to absorb that if we need to. You'll see that there are 2 trust funds that deal with capital improvements. The first one is School Repair and Maintenance Trust Fund. That one we are going to spend down until it's gone and then eliminate it because it's less flexible than the School Improvement Capital Reserve Fund. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is when we ask the voters to put money into their capital trust funds, it's going to be the School Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, and eventually the School Repair Fund will go away. So this summer we're going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $450,000 on a roof repair and finishing a windows project, and that will drain a significant chunk of that. I mentioned the school technology trust fund. You see there's currently $148,000. Jason will be using $35,000 of that for their firewall appliance. And then you see the special education expendable trust fund. We have $358,839.80. The board will be establishing how much of a contribution they want to make this year. We do that out of the year-end fund balance. It's not raised and appropriated. It's just simply placed in there from the year-end fund balance. I'm guessing it'll probably be a number similar to last year, which was 50, so we'll probably have over $400,000 there. And then we have a utility capital reserve fund that has $26,167, and we have not had reason to tap that, and we haven't added to it at any time since I've been here. And with that, the last slide, I wanted to share this with you just because it's revenue information. These are all the federal grant programs that we benefit from as a district. You probably remember the ESSER programs, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. We had to have expended all of those money as of September 30, 2024, so those are no more. We did use that money for a lot of really good things. The playground at the elementary school is probably the most visible thing, but we've gotten a lot of technology and training and curriculum programs that our teachers use out of that. The other three grants, Title 1A, Title 2A, and Title 4. Title 1A, you can see, it's consistently going down. If you go back to 2021, we were getting $226,000. Today, for this year, we got $132,000. That's tied into free and reduced lunch counts. And as the neediness of our community is going down by view of the number of kids in free and reduced lunch, that number continues to drop. If this pattern continues, we're probably going to see a little less. That's the grant that we had to make differences in staffing, because we had a number of our interventionists at the elementary school that were being paid out of the grant. As you can see, when there's more there, we can hire more people. Title II is where we do most of our professional development stuff, and that thankfully has gone up, and we're able to use that. We have a very active PD program and a mentor program for new staff. And then the last one, Title IV, is to do, you can use that for anything to do with social emotional learning or STEM. And you can see that allocation this year has dropped inexplicably, to be honest, but that's just what they gave us. But you can see the amount we're getting from the feds is going down. And then this is the last thing I wanted to mention, just to give you an idea of what our warrants will likely be. As you know, Article 1 is always elect officers. So Article 2 will be the proposed operating budget. Article 3 will be a new teacher contract. Article 4 will actually be another article related to the teacher contract, but it's basically in the event that it doesn't pass, we have the permission to have another one special meeting just to do with finances. Article 5 will be a CIP contribution. Article 6 will be the employee benefit one, and Article 7 will be special ed trust fund. But again, none of those numbers have been established by the board yet, and they will likely finalize that on December 19th. So with that, that's all I have for you.
Yes, questions?
So the last three there, those are going to be for additional money? Those aren't the ones that say giving you the approval to put $50,000 of any fund balance or whatever into those funds? It's going to be asking for an additional amount of money.
That's a discussion that the board has to have.
Okay.
Last year, the CIP was an additional amount of money. The employee benefits in special education was not additional. It was out of the year-end fund balance. One of the things that the board has to discuss and decide how they want to manage the CIP contribution. Do they want to take it out of the year-end fund balance, or do they want to have it be an increase in the tax burden? That's a discussion they need to have. But the important reason why the CIP article last year, we didn't do it as a year-end fund balance one, was because we think it's so important that we don't want to not do it. And the danger of doing it as a trust fund, as a fund balance, is if you don't have the money, you don't do it.
You had mentioned a federal SEL grant earlier.
Yes.
Is that going to show up in that title for?
No, that's actually not a federal grant, that's actually from Community Mental Health. We're working with state and local mental health people. So it's 750,000, broken down 150,000 per year over 5 years. We're still in the process of getting the exact terms, but it will show up as a revenue in one of our financial reports at some point this year.
Hi, thanks. I'd love to ask if you thought there was going to be a delayed opening due to weather, but I won't do that. Do you think you mentioned a newly adopted literacy program? I'm curious if that was a result of analyzing curriculum gaps and deciding you needed it, or was this literacy program part of the regular rotation of when you say this year it's literacy, next year it's math, next year it's social studies, whatever it is?
I would say it's a little of all of those things.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
It started mostly with our K-5 teachers saying we need a consistent program. So we put together a committee of representatives of all grade levels. They reviewed multiple programs. They spent last year piloting multiple programs, and then they recommended My View Literacy as the one that they chose. And so this year is the first year of implementation.
Nice, so it's going to be static through the elementary school.
Yeah, it's K through 5. And we're starting to have conversations about whether it should continue all the way up to 8th grade, and I think that's a conversation to be had. Yes, it was part of a program review, but probably mostly I think people were recognizing the need. We analyzed data of student performance. We looked at how our kids are doing and what do they need. And
Yeah, the gaps
yeah.
pop up, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
So it's kind of a loaded question, but I'm really looking for just a short answer. When you look at like sort of the increase in behavioral health services, need for behavioral health services or out of placement, do you and the board look at a strategic plan for like, okay, well, what's the cost of this versus what would the cost be of increasing services in the Newmarket school system?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have done is that we actually have a couple of programs that are in the school that are geared to work with that. So we have what we call the reset room that we've established at the elementary school. And the intent of that is to work with all students who have regulatory and social emotional challenges and work with their teachers to develop plans to manage the behavior and help them be more successful. And that's like what we would call a tier 2, because when we talk about different levels, tier 1 is what you do at the classroom level. Tier 2 is sort of not special education, but it's something that's not being provided to everybody, but being provided to those who have a need. And then tier 3 is the special education services and all of the right through out of district placements. So we are absolutely trying to do things that we can do. In fact, the grant that we were just talking about is really about trying to develop internally behavioral health systems that can help more and more kids be successful, because it isn't like something in the water suddenly changing. I mean, it's like the environment that kids are growing up in and living in is different, and I think we have to figure out how we support them, hopefully we'll get there, and reduce the number by one. Anything else?
All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Great, I'll see you guys next week.
So that was a lot of material for this
Yeah,
evening.
it is.
So we just have to approve the budget, approve the meeting minutes from last meeting. Those who were in attendance. Scott was not here, and Danielle, Brian, I think you were not here, and Danielle was not here. So everybody else is free to vote. We have a motion to accept the minutes from the November 25th meeting, made by Ned Carpenter.
I'll second.
Seconded by Chris Blackstone. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And we have the abstentions
One
we just mentioned.
Abstention.
Yeah, we have the abstentions we just mentioned, okay. So the upcoming schedule, so the next meeting is the 16th, next Monday. In order to help them be responsive
for questions, if you could get questions back to me by email by Thursday night, I'll compile them and get them over to them Friday morning, and then they'll be able to, to be able to provide us. Steve wants to be able to, if there's questions that relate to a particular department or something like that, he wants to be able to arrange for the department head to be here to answer us directly. January 6th is our public hearing. And then on the 13th is our vote. So we'll vote on the town and school budgets on the 13th. And then the reconsideration is, I don't know why this is wrong. Anyway, the reconsideration is the 16th. So hopefully we don't have to use that date. Okay?
Yep.
Any other questions? Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you. All in favor?
Right.
Thank you.